Welcome to the Purpose Driven Executive Podcast, where we help you go from making your work your life to making your life work. We share true stories, interviews, and experiences that will help you, the hero, in your quest for passion and purpose. Higher purpose, higher productivity. This is the Purpose Driven Executive Podcast. Purveyors of purpose. Listen, you are doing what you're doing because you're trying to make a difference and you know that you're here for a reason. I have brought to you someone who probably gave me one of the biggest chiropractic, and I'm holding up air quotes, not true chiropractic, but productivity chiropractic adjustments that I've had in my life. And I'm not going to tell you what she does, but I have loved her, just watching what she does and who she is in the midst of it. And I'm going to invite onto the show, Dee Mullin. Dee, welcome, lady.
Thanks, Donnie. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this moment for a while. So don't tell us what you do. I want to hear, Dee, what do you love?
Oh, all right. That is a deep question to kick us off. What I love is, I love life, and I love the idea that we are creating our own reality. So it's something I'm really passionate about, and just embracing that. I love intentional living. I love the pursuit of being the best version of myself and helping others pursue the same thing.
Woo! Okay, all right, we it's a wrap. Those are fun things to be in love with. I love, Dee, this is the reason why we're talking, right? These are similarities that we have. I think if I ever needed a spiritual transplant, I think you have the matching DNA that could save me there with those.
Well, that's a compliment. Thanks.
All right, so tell us. You can tell us a little bit now about what you do. How does that work its way out in your life on a daily and just a regular basis?
It works its way out probably more than the people in my life needed to. It gets into every conversation that I have, and I think it's just who I am. It led me to, in terms of what I do professionally, it led me to starting to coach. So I do professional coaching. And that's something that I really love, and it allows me to just have that conversation, which is why I'm so excited to be here with you, because it really is my favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah. So this has brought you to a place to where, I guess, like, maybe share a little bit about that. What do you do in terms of coaching, and then in the space that you live in? Fill us in a little bit there so we can connect the dots from where you're coming from.
Yeah, so my coaching journey has been interesting. I started doing coaching more on, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this, but more on like productivity and action and things that I would put into like the effort category, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But as I have evolved in my own journey, I now coach more on the idea of alignment. So this idea of, it's not only what we're doing, but it's the energy from which we're doing things. So to me, I define alignment, and I tell people that, when you're in alignment when you're happy, like it's a joyful, happy feeling. And the idea is not that we have to be happy all the time. So that I can just cross that off. But the idea is that alignment is doing things that are not in resistance. So resistance to me is the opposite of alignment. So anyway, when it comes to coaching, I really look at, again, not only what we're doing but not only what we're doing, the activity or the action, but from what energy we're doing it from. Are we coming from a place of alignment, or are we coming from a place of resistance? Are we coming from abundance or scarcity, right? Love or fear?
Okay, you've said a lot in there. Indeed, listen, I work from the coaching space as well. Obviously, that, and not that. Draw for me the line between, I think, producing or pushing and effort and the grind, and A plus B plus C always equals D. Draw for me the line between that and what you have come to see as truth.
Yeah. So I think the pushing the effort, the A plus B equals C, it's a very culturally pervasive message. It's what we grew up with. It's what school tells us, right? The harder you work, the more you achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm a recovering workaholic overachiever because that is the way I lived life for over 30 years. But what I've realized is that you can get better results by adjusting. You can make these like quantum leaps in terms of results and productivity more so by adjusting your energy than you can by adjusting the action and effort. Um, so I don't know if that answers your question, but
Oh yeah, no, it just brings me to another question because I definitely, so I want to hear, and I'm going with you. I'm picking up what you're laying down. The I remember working with a guy before he was like the number 20 producer at his company, and I worked with him in one of the, like, he was already good, and he just wanted to do it with less stress, maybe a little bit less time.
mhm,
We found what he loved. The guy loved flying airplanes.
mhm,
I'm like, okay, John, you're going to fly airplanes. He's like,
mhm.
ah, and he's like, okay. He got recertified. Pretty soon he was flying once a week. Not too long after that, it was like he was working 3.5 days a week. Guess what happened to his production?
I'm sure it skyrocketed.
Yeah, it did. Like he was number 4 in the company,
Yeah,
working less, and he actually purchased his own airplane.
yeah, that's awesome.
Right, that was joy fed. So talk to me about that, like the joy that produces. I'm curious.
Yeah, so I just think like it's funny. So I say that alignment is a shapeshifter, and we have to be really aware and present to know when we're in alignment and when we're not. And it's not one of those things. So again, going back to your like A plus B plus C equals D, we are so prone to be like formulaic, right? We're always looking for this is the thing that works today, therefore it will always work. And I think that that gets us into a lot of trouble because we came up with this formula at one point and it worked, and now it's not working, and so we're going to do more of it, right? And that's pervasive in everything. That shows itself in like what I'm talking about as well with alignment. So I say that because alignment is a shapeshifter. Like there are times where effort and work and whatever that looks like in your line of work, like making the calls, going on the meetings, when that like checking the boxes actually puts you into alignment and you're getting results from it. But you're not necessarily getting, in my opinion, you're not getting results from the effort or the box checking. You're getting results because you're getting joy from that. That's feeding you, right? There are other times, to like your point, where you really have to, where that's not working, where you're feeling stressed or burned out, and doing more is going to make everything worse, which we know, right? Where you can take your foot off the gas on that side, do more of the things that you love, but you have to do them. Even the flying of the airplane, I love the story, but I think what's important is that client that you were working with, I would guess that when he was in the airplane, he wasn't feeling guilty or thinking I really should be at work or I should be doing this or that, because that's resistance. So you could be doing
Mm,
the thing that you think you love, but if you're doing that in the energy of resistance, that's not going to work either. Does that make sense?
it does. It does. And I want to come back to this work guilt
Yeah.
that you just now pulled out. But before that, I want to, do you take me to a place to where um, maybe you weren't this way, right?
Yeah.
I know that, right? Obviously in our culture, and I know you're a driven person, high achiever, all of those things. So I know there had to be a time where this wasn't like what you flowed from or flowed to. Um, take me to that moment and tell me about the change. What happened?
That's a great question. I don't even know if I can pinpoint. I think everything's like a compound like effect, right? So I don't know if I can pinpoint one moment, but yeah, as I said, 30 years of my life or maybe more, I followed sort of like the old school way of thinking. But again, like I think I did a lot of that from a place of alignment. Not no, I didn't have that vocabulary, and I would never have called
Sure,
it that,
sure.
but it was working for me.
Hmm.
And then I think at some point and I can't pinpoint it, but something shifted, and I started, in my own journey. You're sitting looking at me. I have hundreds of books behind me. I read like a crazy person. I just can't get enough information. And I started reading just smarter people than me talking about this, right? The idea of effort does not equal, effort doesn't always equal results. And like energy alignment will get you better results than just effort. I'm trying to think of the way that it was said, but that was sort of the idea. And then I just started playing with that and seeing the results in my own life. And it's hard to argue when you get positive results, right?
So you decided to experiment around a little bit with this.
Mm-hmm.
And can you like, were there any moments where it's like, where you felt like you were kind of twisting yourself up into a knot, let's just say the old way versus this, and were there any big breaks or breaking moments that
yeah, absolutely. Actually, and you can probably relate to this. I think that it is so much easier. So as a coach, it's so much easier to see things in other people. And then one of the things I love so much about coaching is that I'll be coaching somebody and see something in them. And then later I'll be like meditating or reflecting, and I'll realize that I'm going through the same thing, and that the advice that I just gave to that person or whatever conclusion we came to would be really good to apply to myself. So I think that's where I probably started to see it most, right? And you and I have coached in similar places, so we kind of came from the same, school of thought on several things. And so you can relate to this, and I'm sure a lot of people listening can. I would work with salespeople, and they would not be getting the result that they'd be looking for. And we would look at, well, how many calls are you making, right? This is like a pretty common conversation.
You sound like a manager right now, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how many calls are you making? And then the general idea, the way that we typically think is like, well, if you're not hitting X quota by making Y number of calls, you have to make more calls, right? More effort, more effort, more effort. And I would see that, and I would see people sometimes actually taking the action, many times still not taking the action. And I started to realize that if you're making 10 calls a day and it's not working, why do we think that making 15 calls in the same energy or a worse energy, because now you're in this mindset of like, you're just hitting your head against the wall. Like, why are we thinking that that's going to get us a better result?
Tell me this. I don't know. I reflect on this one often, Dee. It's almost like we see success or whatever version of utopia that we're going for as something that we don't deserve and can't have. And so therefore it's like we create barriers to doing that. And so now, instead of me just having it because I deserve it because I'm a human being, now I'm going to have to just put myself through the worst boot camp in the whole world. And I have to hate myself enough to actually make it happen. I see a lot of people, this is where they get their change from. I don't ever see that change lasting. But maybe talk to that mentality of almost like self-flagellation, self-hatred to come to like change. What's your opinion of that?
I think that is so culturally like built into us. I think that we see monuments of people who have overcome great obstacles. And we think that must be the way, like that's the way to get the approval. That's the way to achieve whatever it is we're looking to achieve, is I've got to really struggle, because we think things can't come that easy. And we're told that since we're so young, right? Like the path of least resistance is like that. There's shame in taking the path of least resistance. If you achieve something and you didn't struggle for it, then a lot of times I think people are like embarrassed to even say. And what's interesting, if you look behind me, is that I have this side of books over here they're all business books. And then on this side, they're all kind of like spirituality books. And I think there's a beautiful intersection. But what's interesting is that I think a lot of these business books where people are writing that story of I struggled so hard and then I achieved, I think that's a story that we accept. That's a story that people like, that sells books. But I think that there's a huge piece missing in those narratives, which is this side. Like,
hey, thanks for being someone who is on this journey of purpose with me. And I am with you, my friend, and I've got something for you. Have you ever been moving towards purpose and sometimes it just looks like a big mess? Sure you have. We all have. And the reality is we're usually not going to get to a destination unless we have a roadmap. And that's exactly what I've created. If you will go to purposedrivenexecutive.com, You can get it for free. And this is the culmination of all of my studies, all of my coaching, all of even my own personal living. And I've created a very visual, very easy way for you to map out your purpose. This is for you. This is for people you're leading. This is for your family. Go on over right now, purposedrivenexecutive.com, and get your free map of purpose.
Thank you. And sorry.
It's okay. So I think like this side of the equation, the energy, the spiritual piece, and I almost hate using those words because I think people really put them in this like new age category, but like everything you're doing, you're coming from an energy, right? Like we are energetic beings. So that's there, whether you like that vocabulary or not. But anyway, I think the energy is really missing from these narratives. And I think we struggle unnecessarily to be able to tell a story that's going to be accepted, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does. I feel like there's almost like there's a mythology that we build, and there are standards. And listen, if you look back at the roots, at least of our country, like it's Rome, right? And you look back even farther, there's probably nothing more that would display some of those thoughts within maybe the story of Sparta, where it's just like this, it's just this very stoic, grit and do what you can until you get there. And and that's how we get there. We lay that road. We do the hard work. And I think it served industrial companies, obviously for a time. I don't know that it serves the individual. I guess what I would say is this, and I want to hear your thoughts on just even the terminology, the grind, because we have a grind warship in our country. In our culture. I think it's a way, but I think you're sadly mistaken if you make it the way. What does Dee Mullin think about the grind?
It was a word I used to use a lot, and I was like proud of it. It's funny, but I probably very obviously kind of reject that idea now. I think that what's interesting is, like you just said, it probably serves an organization, but doesn't serve the individual. And I'm sure there's truth to it serving an organization to a degree, but it for sure, in my opinion, doesn't serve the individual. I think that what you're talking about, it's like this, it's a very external story. And I think, unfortunately, we live our lives very externally. I want this external thing. And like, it's just all of this, right? What's going on around us. Whereas I think maybe grit in and of itself is not a bad thing, but like, we've got to put the grit and grind and work. I hate those words, but we can try it, right? We have to use that type of effort internally. Like we've got to connect inside, and understand that whatever it is that we think we want, if it's external, it's not going to really fulfill us the way that we hope that it will. Like happiness is something that's going to come from our relationship with ourselves, and it's all internal. Does that make sense?
Yes. All right. I want to go back to something you said earlier. And I think a lot of people, I was just talking to an individual the other day, by the way, high profile guy, big, nobody would know that this is what's echoing in his heart, but it's a form of what you were talking about, work guilt. Right? He's like, I'm driving and sometimes I look at my phone and I want there to be something to do. I want there to be more. I want there. And I more and more the people who are driven towards success and they haven't defined it for themselves. They're just taking wholesale, again, the mythology or the narrative that's been handed down to them. It's almost like there's this machine that gets going and they can't turn it off. Talk to me. Like, first off, I mean, like, listen, I think we all deal with the residue or the echoes, at least of that. Like, what have you done? What did you do? What do you say to people who are in that scenario of work guilt?
Well, it's funny. So I think in that example that you're giving about the guy who's driving thinking like, I want to see a fire pop up on my phone because I want it. That's how I understood it. Is that what you're meaning? Like, I want there to be a problem so I can put it out so that I'm
validated. Yeah. I mean, like that's the scenario, but I think others, it's like the brain is still going and it's almost like there's like we create this problem to solve for whatever reason, or, oh, I forgot to do this and I need to do that. And maybe I'm scared about this. And like, I think there's a lot of things maybe tangled into that. So you take it any way you want to untangle that one.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot that goes into these things. I feel like so the example of, and this is obvious, right? I don't think I'm blowing any minds, but by the example of, I want a fire to happen so I can put it out, that's we're finding a sense of self-worth again in this external place. So, and it becomes addictive, right? If that's where wherever you're finding your self-worth, you're going to become addicted to in some capacity. So if you're finding it from solving problems at work, then you are going to keep wanting things like that to come up. In other respects, when people are at home and they feel guilty that they should be working, or they're working and they feel guilty that they should be home, to me, that's just, we have split energy, and it's pretty much the opposite of alignment, right? So there's a lot of resistance, and we're not really doing a service to either side. Guilt in and of itself is misalignment. It's this splitting of energy, of thinking that I should be doing one thing and I'm doing something else. And it's not that it's not even that you have to shift to do the thing you think you should be doing. You just have to shift your mindset and how you're looking at it, right?
So, okay. So take me through that. So let's just say I'm the person that feels guilty because I'm not making enough calls, or because I'm not doing whatever. Like what do you say to me? Because there's someone that's listening to this right now, Dee, that's feeling exactly that. Oh, I didn't make enough recruiting calls, or I didn't do the work that it takes for me to feel validated. What talk to that.
Yeah. So I didn't make enough calls. I would be asking questions about why. So feeling guilty about not making enough calls. Like, yeah, why is it that we're not making the calls? Why do we feel like we have to make more calls? Just kind of digging into it. It's hard without like the other side of the person. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm definitely putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I like it. I think that it's so individual, but I think that feeling in general, like the guilt so if you're feeling guilty that you're not making enough calls, you have to make more calls. Like, so this is one of the things I was going to say earlier. So I think that when I talk about alignment and where I see the path to success not being through effort, I think people think, well, then I don't have to do anything, and that doesn't really make sense.
Right.
So that's not it. It's not about not doing anything. So if you feel guilty that you're not making calls, and that's really where that's connected to, then you have to make more calls so that you can alleviate that. But then you have to figure out why you weren't making the calls and find a way to make them from an energy that is going to serve you. But when you're in alignment, you will get kind of like you'll be led to inspired action. So I think action and resistance, no good. Inspired action, great. So it's not that action is wrong. It's just, again, where is it coming from?
Okay. You just like the next question. What is inspired action?
To me, it's where you kind of let the answers come to you. All the answers are within. So I'll give you an example of inspired action in my own life. So I have a very strong meditation practice. It means a lot to me. It's like the only way that I feel like I can get through things the way that I am able to. So if I have a problem or something I'm looking to solve or whatever, I sit in meditation and I just prepare my mind and let kind of the inspiration come. And we're getting those downloads.
Oh, it was getting good. So we're going to start over in a second, and tell me when you can hear me. It's now telling me your internet connection is on. I literally pay so much for my internet. It's not even funny. Can you hear me? All right. So we're getting downloads. I think the last thing that you left it off. So.
Okay. So I feel like we're getting downloads or inspiration or the answers to the things that we're trying to solve all the time. But if we are busy in this rat race and we're on that hamster wheel and we're in resistance, we're not going to feel that. We're not going to receive the inspiration, which would be the easy way to do things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, for example, if someone is, let's just say, whatever, we keep going back to calls. So it's the calls, right? Someone's making the calls. They're not excited about it. They feel wow, gosh, it's bringing to mind another person that I know. Guy earns like, he's in the top 0.5% of financial earners in America. But when he gets on the phone, he becomes just such a shrunken version of himself. And like, you can, like, there's always this thing. There's always a monkey on his back about the calls. Now he does it every day because he feels tough by doing it. But there's like, it's just, there's such diminishing returns. What you're saying is this person needs to go back, regroup. First off, do what you feel like you need to do, but go back and figure out why, and also the how. There's a little bit of a how, it sounds like, that was meshed in that the answer is actually, you have the answers. And talk to me about the balance, because obviously we learn from other people, but there's also there's this sweet thing inside of us that like, we contain, like, the answers are within. We have what we need. It's just like a seed but talk to me about the balance of receiving from the outside, but also coming from the inside in terms of that inspiration.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I'm saying like receiving, which sounds like maybe something coming from externally, but it's that I think is sort of coming from within,
Okay.
So I like visualize it as coming from like somewhere up here and coming to down, and I'm saying download, but it's really something that's coming from internally. So I would use the word like your inner being or your soul or whatever, which I know is a very weird thing to talk about when we're talking about calls and business conversations, but
So, and this is interesting, right? Because I will say, typically speaking, you and I both, we work with executives, and usually you are finding it's very empirical, right? It's numbers driven, everything, shareholders meetings, everything. It's all about like the numbers, what happens this quarter, what are our projections. It's all empirical. And I think that obviously there's like, we're not going to get rid of the empirical, but in terms of when we're talking about individual performance and someone functioning in their gifts, and someone being able to connect with the situation and literally have the prescription for what they're doing, there has to be some sort of spiritual connection.
Yeah, and you can use any
eye rolls like from executives. Some, like, I guess I don't necessarily come at it. I just want. I don't know. What's your experience when you?
I'm not going into board meetings talking about our souls, but I think we bring them with us. But I have a book and I cannot pronounce his name, so I won't. But I think it's just called Flow. Like we hear these things all the time. Yeah, is that?
I'm reading this now. Yeah, I can't pronounce his name either, so don't feel bad.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Mine has a different cover, but yeah. Oh, here, look, I'll show you. Look, this is the old school.
Yeah.
But like when we talk about flow, and you hear it in sports all the time, right? Which is also like very number driven. Yeah, being in the zone. Nobody's eye rolling about flow in the zone. It's the same thing. Right. I'm saying the same thing. So there is so much power in being in flow. Being in flow and being in alignment to me are the exact same.
Right.
But this is just a little more acceptable. So we can use that word. But if you're your client that you're talking about who absolutely hates being on the phone and knows that he's not bringing his best version of himself, that is not in flow, and you're always going to get a better result being in this flow state than being in a state of resistance. So for that person, I would say, like, again, what's the underlying reason? Why do we feel so out of flow when we're on the phone? And then let's think outside the box here, because there's any action that you can take in a flow state is going to get you a better result than the action you're taking out of one. So if that means instead of making 50 calls, we meet 3 people or whatever, like that, and we're in our flow state in that, it looks like a smaller quantity, but we are bringing our whole self and we are in alignment.
Yes.
We're going to get way more results there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the, like when you were talking about earlier, I think that effort doesn't always equal outcome. I think we're talking about that, right? That there's a factor inside of all of us that, and I don't care where people are spiritually, like you do have to believe that there's something inside that can equal more than just the sum of effort, I believe, to go down this path at all. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're willing to do that, when you're willing to believe that some of the answer is mysteriously hidden inside of you, or along the way, other circumstances will arise to meet you, to help you to get to where you're going. Like that definitely takes some sort of faith aspect, to believe. But I've seen so many more people, myself included, live lives that are more fulfilling when they learn to rest in that. And I will say though, there is, at least for me, it's a process. It's almost like recovering from the addiction of always having to see the results of what you did and what you said. How does Dee Mullin do that? How do you stay in flow, and how do you keep from going back and digging up the seed to see if it's growing?
It's so hard. It's so hard. I find myself, I think to me, it's just awareness, right? A real deep awareness of where are my thoughts right now. So I started this conversation by saying that one of the things I love is this concept or law or whatever, that we create our own reality. I really believe in that. But I think we create our own reality through our thoughts and our, where our focus and our energy. So back to your question, the way that I keep myself in this space is by having a deep awareness of where my thoughts are. And I'm not perfect at that at all, but I think that like very few people even attempt it. I think that we are creating by default. Most people are creating by default because they're not even aware of what their thoughts are. When we were talking before about like having to do that internal work, I think people have a lot of resistance towards internal work. It's like scary. It's like you don't want to look in the mirror. So I keep a real awareness of my own thoughts. And then I see myself doing it all the time. I was actually driving 2 weeks ago, and I found myself out of alignment driving, thinking like, I have to fix this and I have to fix this and I have to fix this. And then I just heard my thoughts going through the list of all the things that I have no control over, that I had just decided in this moment I needed to fix, which of course I was going to do through effort, which was not going to be aligned, and I'm not going to fix the problem anyway. And I had to like stop and breathe and center and realize that like that it's not the way. But I study this. I love it. I talk about it all the time, and it's still really in everyday practice.
Yeah, we're not initially wired, right, for that. Oh, dang it. Tell me when you can hear me. La 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 la. Can you hear me? Hello. And are you okay? So, and can you hear me? Hello? Nope, still can't hear me. Come on, man. Hello.
Oh, okay. I think I got it.
Cool. Okay. So I got all your stuff perfectly. Now it's telling me that my internet connection is unstable. So while we have been battling through technical difficulties, but it is so worth it. It's, and I know your personality too, Dee, just like in terms of type and of individual, the way you process information, you would tend to, if left alone, be more prone to care more, which means more prone to stress more. And I'm not seeing that. How did you is that a hard thing? Do you always have to shuck and jive this thing, or is that something that doesn't really bother you anymore?
You're asking how I remain not stressed? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Again, it's an intentional practice. So I said before, really big into meditation, and I am big into journaling and just like affirmations, reinforcing the things that I know. And the things I know are that I really trust the plan, right? Like I know that if I can, this is going to sound like very maybe oversimplified, but I feel like my work is to stay in alignment. My work is to like be in a space of love. Again, like these are things we don't talk about in the business world, but I'm just talking about like how I handle my life, right? To stay in this place of alignment and love, and that everything will work out. I have so much faith and trust that things will unfold the way that they're supposed to unfold. And like stress doesn't really have a place there. Again, that's really intentional. It takes work and it takes the daily practice, but the compound effect of doing that daily practice works. You know, I feel a little less stressed in life these days.
I love it. Yeah, no, I one of close friend today, I saw one of his affirmations to his group that he leads, and he was saying, you know, stress is really a created scenario. All it is just how we decide that we want to interpret a group of facts. It's not real.
Totally.
And yeah, no, I love that. You know, in terms of this stuff, and I know that there are people out there right now, Dee, that they know there's more for them. They know that they were meant for more. They feel like they are going through the motions. They feel like there is something greater for them to do, whether it's at work or at home, and talk to that person a little bit. I know you've talked to that person before in various forms and formats.
Yeah, in myself and in other people.
Help them draw the line and help them to step over it.
So I think that what you were just saying about stress being this created thing, I think that when you're feeling like that, when you're feeling like you have a vision, or maybe you don't even have a vision, but you know that what you're living right now isn't the life that you want to be living, I would encourage somebody to really listen to all the reasons that they would say that they are in that scenario. And then I would challenge them that everything that would come next is just a story. So same way that stress isn't real, it's just the way we're interpreting something. Like, we are just telling stories all day long. So they are, they're sneaky because they sound like logic and reason, but everything is just a story. So when you say that you're the unique special snowflake that has to be in this horrible job and hate your life, it's not true. It's just a story. And that doesn't mean it's easy to break, but that's where I would start. Like, you got to start deconstructing and untangling the stories that are keeping you where you are.
That is strong. I believe if we could freeze all of the thoughts that are going through our brains right now, I think some of what we have is belief, and a lot more of what we have is thought that's connected to emotions that masquerades as belief. Like, it's like we think we believe something, but the reality is when you freeze it and look at it, it's like you realize it's just a story we've let play over and over and over.
Yeah. So my favorite spiritual teacher says that a belief is just a thought we keep thinking. And then Louise Hay, who's another amazing teacher, has a quote that I might screw up right now, but she basically says, once you realize, like, you have to realize that all you're ever dealing with is a thought, and a thought can be changed. So beliefs and thoughts that's it, right? Again, going all the way back to the beginning, we're creating our reality. We're creating through our thoughts and our beliefs. So if you're looking for a different reality, you have to bring awareness to where your thoughts and beliefs are.
Yeah, this is good. You said in the beginning, I'm going to bring it back to this and give you a chance to lay this out. We are creating our own reality. You know, that means something to me. I want to hear maybe a little bit about, you've shared some of obviously what that means to you. Maybe hit that again, and then tell us, like, how would you tell someone to go create their own reality? How can they live the life that they want to live?
Yeah, so the way that we're creating our own reality is, again, by our patterns of thoughts and beliefs. And when I think that this is like a big concept for people, especially if you sort of reject this idea, it's a really big concept to break down. But I think one of the reasons that people might reject it is because I wouldn't have chose this, or I'm thinking these thoughts and nothing's changing. But what we think about most often is like our current situations. So most of the time we're just looking at current conditions. So our thoughts are focused on current conditions, which means we are creating more of those current conditions. So everything is always changing, but it's typically changing into more of the same, because our thoughts are, I mean, again, a belief is just a thought you keep thinking. We have these patterns that are so ingrained that it's hard for us to shift our thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you do want to create a different reality than the one that you are currently living, again, bringing awareness to where your thoughts are and then being very intentional about shifting them. The way to create a reality that's like kind of beyond your wildest dreams is to really reject what you see as reality today. And that's hard to do, but it's worth trying.
So, the one thing that, kind of my head goes to when you're saying that is as a school teacher, I just remember the amount of effort that goes into attention, right? The amount of effort that goes into focus. It's so much easier just to do, to function off of what we already know, right?
Mm-hmm.
To recycle thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And even I've watched that happen as people try to change the habits, behaviors, patterns of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you do something for one day, it's almost like your brain is like wiping that.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is who we've been for the last 1,263 days. So
Yep.
that's a pretty good plan. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we wipe that? Is like, because it sounds like it's that when we're talking about effort and struggle, like, is that the struggle then that you would define in the change, or not the phone calls, but more the defining of thought and focus on it?
Yeah. And so I think that it's so funny that you were saying like the attention takes so much effort in and of itself. So going again, one of my favorite spiritual teachers is Abraham Hicks, and they are all about the power of thought and focus. And Abraham was doing some coaching with somebody, and this person was, arguing the idea, which I love to hear that because I love to hear both sides of the story, right? And this person was saying, so all you're telling me to do is focus. And Abraham was like, you're saying that as if that part's easy, so to your point, like it's so much easier to just take the action that we've been taking for so long versus like to do the hard, deep work of changing our focus and being intentional and being present and aware. We're just on friggin' autopilot.
Talk to me that, and here's the thing, it's easier that way. I think we all know people who wake up and do the same thing, and in a lot of ways, life wouldn't be much different for a dog in terms of it's the same thing, right? If you can almost define the routines. Talk to me about there's always, I think, especially when you redefine yourself, there's not just resistance from within side of you saying, no, this is my identity. And you're having to almost throw that down and say, no, this is. Yeah, but I'm always like, it always sucks. No, this is like, it's like, there's always a constant choosing and a pulling out of the old and toppling. But once we get past that, then we got these external people. They want to typecast us. It was easier for them when they could think about us this way. It was predictable when they could think about us this way. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is that like, if you really want to create something extraordinary, which is, I know, Donnie, what you help people do, it's going to require you to be weird in the world, right? Like if you want to be extraordinary, you're not going, like, you're going to have a lot of haters probably, or, the other thing is, if we really can get into this place of flow, alignment, choose whatever word you want, I believe, because I'm a believer in the law of attraction, I believe that the haters kind of disappear. Because when we can get into this place where we really believe in the new creation of who we're now going to be, either the people around us are going to get on board with that, or they're not going to come around us anymore. One little caveat there, because I work with people on changing themselves a lot, as do you, and that this does come up, right? Like your spouse or your children or your parents, depending on what your living situation is, the people you live with, right, are going to have opinions about this new grand idea that you have. My encouragement, or what I encourage people to look at in those conversations or those relationships, are that the relationships you have are mirroring things back to you. So I think when you're going through some kind of change, but you don't really have your footing and your, like the scenario you just described, where this is who I've been, this is who I'm going to be, this is who I've been, this is who I'm going to be. You have to expect that you're going to get some resistance from other people because they're picking up on the resistance that's within you. But when you can make that move over to, this is the reality I'm creating, this is who I'm going to be, these are the changes I'm making, and no one's going to shake me from this. And I think sometimes it's better to move over to that place kind of in silence, right? Before you like announce to everybody that you're going to be this whole new person. But once you can like really dig your heels in there and stand firm, then you're not going to get that reaction from other people. Again, they're either going to get on board or they're going to, depending on who they are, maybe be in your experience less.
It's funny, actually. Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I just now realized like this is over a week old that I wrote this. I wasn't even thinking, but it says behind my head, when you respond to your call to adventure, others will resist you. This is not haters, as we would say.
Yeah.
This is just them not being able to predict you. So
and it's also they're picking up on like anything that anyone is giving you, they're picking up from you to some extent, right? Like again, this is an energy exchange. So if I am very firm in something, it would be very strange for you to call me out on that thing. Like that wouldn't be, does that make sense? Like it wouldn't really come up. But if I've got some like split energy or some lack of confidence in something, of course, depending on our relationship and what that thing is, but it's much more likely that you will reflect that back to me.
Yeah, I can see that. I also can see as well, I think, just, you see it in actors all the time, right? Hey, Henry Winkler, you played the Fonz. You can't do anything else. Harry Potter, we're only going to think of you as Harry Potter. Like these poor people that kind of get put in those roles. I think that can happen as well. Like I think it's almost like we create this groove.
Yeah.
And we're going to go around our families. This is Thanksgiving week. And it's weird how a 45-year-old little brother still like fits into like, it's like as though he was a teenager. He's not, like in my case, I have a 41 and a 43. I still see them as teenagers. It's just weird that there's that, again, it's a typecast thing where this person is supposed to have all the answers, or here's like in our case, it's you're the happy big family, or you're the single independent person, or it's just, there's this thing that people, it's easy for me to think about you in long tail form and predict you if I think I know who you are. And
well, I think something that's interesting about that, I agree with you, but I think, so we can never get inside somebody else's head, right? So when we're looking at like Henry Winkler and we're looking at him being like, oh, kind of sucks that he's totally typecast as the Fonz and like he can't break out of that. We don't know what's going on in his head. We're probably feeling that because it's something he feels. Like he probably did that. So obviously we're using this as a random example, but he probably did that role for so long that is like, that he has this fear of like, no one's ever going to see me as anything else. No one's ever going to see me as anything else. And then we respond in kind. And I think our families are similar, like yes, you have the way that you perceive your brother, whatever. But when your brother gets back into his family environment, he accepts that role.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So
he's
projecting it, you're reacting to it. I think we're co-creating it. You know what I mean?
Oh no, I totally agree. And but it's weird how we have to actually reject those roles or those grooves that are just so easy to fall into. Get back around your high school friends. If you're the funny one, they're going to look to you to make the jokes or whatever it is. Like there's a weird pressure, but also let's just call it's just an easier way of life to live that way. It takes so much more energy to pay attention and to focus on something. I guess.
Yeah. And I think that's our ego gets really involved too. Like one of our ego's jobs is to keep us safe, and comfort zones are safe. Yeah. So I know who I am when I'm the class clown, and that's a safe space, and we're just gonna stay right here. So again, like we're creating, but we're just creating more of the same.
I love it. Well, Dee, I'm going to put your info into the show notes. This has been fun. It has been enriching. And if there are any last moments of wisdom that you'd like to rattle out for someone, again, like, I'm an executive. I want to be more purposeful. I want to be smiling at the end of my day. And by the way, I'm not talking about these people as though they're not me. Like, I'm not separating myself from these people. I am in this journey. I haven't arrived fully at any of this stuff. I'm on the journey to being, like, for me, I want to be the most joyful man I know. But talk to that person who wants to become something that they bought the lie. Maybe they're in their 30s or in their 40s, male, female, doesn't matter. And they're just saying, I don't know if I can.
So one of my favorite quotes, again, from Abraham Hicks is, if this, I mean, it's going to sound a little new agey, but if this time-space reality, meaning like your current experience, is giving you a desire, so whatever that desire is, if that desire has been inspired within you, then the time-space reality can give you, like, knows that you have the wherewithal to bring that to fruition. So if there's something that you kind of think about and think, I'm not good enough or I can't do it, just know that you have that inspiration or that desire for a specific reason. And your desire, Donnie, is totally different than mine. I think oftentimes we think, well, everyone would want to be the most joyful person alive, or whatever your, the thing you hold on to is, but that's not true. Everybody has a very unique desire. And the fact that you have that vision for yourself, just know that you having it means that you can achieve it. But you got to be intentional about it.
Love it. Dee, thank you for bringing us into places where other people would not, and for taking all of the concentrated goodness from the 1,000 books that are behind you there, and giving us a brain download. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.